All right. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Sheila Gold. I'm the Executive Director of Admissions here at Tulane School of Professional Advancement. Some of you I may have met, others of you I'm meeting for the first time, so welcome. I'm joined by my colleague Dalila, who is our program director, and she sort of oversees our prior learning assessment coordination. So the two of us are going to talk a little bit about the school itself, some of the history of the school, why we have a history of offering credit for those of you who come in with extensive life and work experience. I'm going to talk a little bit about some nuts and bolts of some of the admissions process. And then Dalila, of course, will talk to you about how you get credit for all of the knowledge that you bring in as a student. So we welcome you. This webinar is also being recorded, so you will get a copy of the recording probably tomorrow as a follow-up. So if you want to rewatch it or share it with friends, feel free to do that as well. For those of you who are current students, you may know a little bit about our history, but for those of you who aren't, it's always good to hear. So the Tulane School of Professional Advancement, or as we call it, SOPA, is one of 9 small schools that make up all of Tulane University. The university itself was actually founded in 1834 as the Medical College of Louisiana. But about 50 years after its founding, the very first iteration of SOPA was founded. The early founders of the university had a commitment to educating our local working professionals who maybe wanted to go back to school to get continuing education or get an additional degree, but also had some career experience, or maybe were a little bit older than the traditional 18-year-old student right out of high school. And so you see a lot of that history in what we continue to do today, specifically our credit for prior learning program. We know that our students come in with lots of prior knowledge. So we are very much connected to our original roots and committed to working with adult learners. So a little bit of what we're going to talk about in this webinar, we're going to touch on our online learning. We've been doing online learning at SOPA here for several years. We didn't just start during the pandemic, which is kind of when everybody else heard about online learning and kind of jumped on board. So we'll talk a little bit about how we do it differently. We think it's a differentiator for our school because we are committed to excellence in this area. We'll talk about our programs and our faculty, our student support, which I also think is a differentiator. We'll talk a little bit about our affordability and flexibility, and of course, just backing all of this up by the strength of Tulane University. So I am going to have Dalila talk a little bit about the prior learning assessment piece, and then I will jump back in a little later. So Dalila.
Thanks so much, Sheila, and hi, everybody, and welcome, and thank you for making time to join us today. I think one of the most exciting things about working at SOPA and teaching at SOPA is learning about the different kinds of experience that our students bring to the classroom. And for me, and my role as the prior learning assessment coordinator, I kind of get to learn more and get a better sense of the range and the breadth of these experiences that everybody's coming with. So these experiences enrich your classroom experience. You learn from each other and you grow as you're learning in your different programs. But also these experiences provide you with an opportunity to potentially earn some credit for the experience that you already have. So credit for prior learning at SOPA can be awarded through, it can be awarded for any learning that's taken place outside of the classroom. So this can include work experience, community service, as well as military training. So we'll talk about some of the ways in which this can happen. So for undergraduate students at SOPA, you're able to earn up to 24 credits through prior learning assessment. And a total of 60 credits can be transferred. So these 24 credits would count towards that 60. If, for example, you are bringing in, let's say, 3 credits, then you would be able to transfer in more of your coursework, but it sort of balances out. Prior learning credit does not count towards the school's residency requirement. And also, if you earn any prior learning credit, it might not be transferable to other schools at Tulane. And then for graduate students, you may receive up to 6 credits through prior learning assessment. And this is primarily through portfolio assessment. And we'll talk about this a little more. So we have different options for earning credit. Some of it includes credit by examination. So these are standardized tests that you can take. So they're CLEP tests and DSST tests. And they're generally standardized tests primarily for sort of introductory level courses. So things like introduction to accounting or math courses and things like that. Usually they're sort of the undergraduate level, lower level courses. And then you can also earn credit for language proficiency. So if you are fluent in another language other than English, you may be able to complete a test at Tulane and then earn credit for that language. So you may be able to earn, for example, 4 credits for intermediate Spanish if you're a fluent speaker of Spanish. And then something that's that we offer here in-house is portfolio assessment, and it's a process. In order to be able to earn credit through portfolio assessment, you would first meet with an advisor, which is most likely me, and we would discuss how your experience aligns with coursework that we offer at SOPA. And if there is clear alignment between your experience and a course for which you seek to earn credit for, then you would begin to learn what's required in order to complete a successful portfolio. So you would take a class that basically teaches you the structure of a portfolio, and then you would write a portfolio narrative and gather supplementary documentation that supports your learning that you've described in the narrative. And then once that's complete, you would submit that portfolio for assessment. So then an assessor will consider whether this portfolio is the equivalent, demonstrates the equivalent amount of knowledge you would have gained if you had taken the class. So for undergraduate students, we actually offer a class. It's a full semester course, PAPL 1000, that goes through this process with you. So in this class, you would begin developing one portfolio, and then you would have time to finish it after the course completes and submit it for assessment. The class is offered every semester. It is 3 credit hours, and it counts as a general elective. And the prerequisites are English 1010 and a 2.0 GPA. The tuition for this class includes 3 portfolio assessments. So you could potentially earn 12 credits for the cost of 1 class. And then for graduate students, you would take a similar class, but it's a little bit more condensed and it's self-guided, but it would still provide you the same opportunities to learn and practice developing a successful portfolio. As mentioned earlier, you can earn up to 6 credits through portfolio assessment, and the cost for graduate students is $1,158 per assessment. So what does it mean to develop a portfolio? So as I mentioned, each portfolio is developed in alignment with the course that we offer. These are typically courses in our applied programs, and they exclude internships, labs, and most of the humanities and liberal arts courses. And what you end up doing in the course is aligning your experiences with the learning outcomes for a particular class in which you have experience. And you end up with a narrative, which is typically about 15 to 25 pages for an undergraduate portfolio, and about 20 to 30 pages for a graduate portfolio. So I think about these as sort of your final papers for a particular class. So if you were to take, for example, introduction to computing class, and if you were to write a final at the end, it would be sort of the same amount of time and time investment that you might expect for a final. And one of the key criteria of a successful portfolio is that the narrative has to demonstrate a mastery of each of the learning objectives for the chosen course. So if the class has 5 learning objectives, your narrative will describe your experience in relation to each one of them. And I think we have an example on the following slide. So this is an example of learning outcomes for an undergraduate course that a lot of folks probably have experience in, especially after the past 2 years. And then if you're working in an office environment, this is likely something that you might find that you've done before. So the course is Internet Collaboration, CPST 1400, and these are the learning outcomes that you would meet if you were to take the class. So by the end of this class, you will be able to define elements of the internet, demonstrate the ability to store and retrieve files and documents using cloud applications, and so on. So if you were to seek credit for this class instead of taking it, in your portfolio, you would structure a narrative around these learning outcomes. So you would have a section where you're defining the elements of the internet and using your previous experiences to support your understanding of what those elements are. Demonstrate the ability to store and retrieve files. Again, you would describe how you've done this in previous experiences, and then potentially submit supplementary documentation. So if you had maybe done a training, or if you had developed a training for other folks in your department, you can include that as sort of supplementary information that supports your narrative, that strengthens it. And an additional example of supplementary documents can include letters. So you can have a letter from a previous supervisor that describes how you've done this particularly well. And then also any sort of certificates or trainings that you've completed, you can also include those as well. But as I noted earlier, in order to receive a passing score for a portfolio, your narrative has to address each of the learning outcomes. And you have to demonstrate mastery to receive credit for that class. And then what happens after you write it? Usually the portfolios are assigned to a faculty member at SOPA who generally teaches that class for which you're seeking credit. And they will use a standardized rubric to evaluate your narrative. And they will also be looking at those learning outcomes and seeing whether or not you have demonstrated mastery of each of the outcomes. The portfolios are evaluated based on content and style. So that's sort of one of the requirements, why we have the requirement for English 1010 is that a portion of it is evaluating the writing style, but the majority of the score is based on the content. For graduate students, you are expected to provide a little more depth and connections to theoretical or conceptual perspectives that are relevant for that particular area. So the assessors will be looking at that as part of the rubric as well. And then if the assessor determines that the portfolio should receive a passing score, this means that you will then receive credit for that class, and this class will then show up on your transcript with a grade that says credit by examination. So if anybody has any questions, I think you can probably unmute, or you can write them in chat and I can address them. And also I am available to meet with you individually as well and talk more if you have any specific questions about this process. And I'll write my email in chat, and I think I will pass it on to Sheila at this point to talk about admissions, and for those of you that are applying to SOPA, she can provide more information about that process.
Thank you, Dalila. So while I'm talking, if you all have questions about the actual process for so Dalila just put her contact information in the chat. And then if you have questions about the portfolio process, feel free to put those in there also. So for those of you who haven't applied to SOPA yet, just a brief overview about our application process. So our application is an online application. It lives on our website, which is sopa.tulane.edu, which is at the bottom of this slide. There's a big button at the top of our website that says apply, and it opens you up into our application portal. For our undergraduate application, we have a $40 application fee. For graduate, it's $50. However, if you've attended this webinar, we're capturing attendance, and that will be waived. That's just our thank you to you all for spending some time with us in the middle of your day. All of our applications require a government ID. So for most people, that's taking a picture of your driver's license and uploading that. We'll need transcripts from any schools from which you've received academic credit. And for those of you who are applying to graduate programs, we most likely will need a personal statement, and there's some short answers to some questions that we will also need, and quite possibly also a resume. So that's just kind of some basic information about the application. I am also available to answer any questions along the way if you want to drop those in a chat or reach out to me by email also. Some deadlines. We have 3 starts. We have the traditional fall start, the spring start, which is in January, and summer start, which actually just started. Our deadline for the fall is August 1st. However, I tell folks you don't have to wait till our application deadline. We do read applications on a rolling basis. So if you complete your application, we will review it and get an admissions decision for you. We do have some early enrollment deadlines where you can get early enrollment scholarships. June 1 is our early enrollment deadline for summer. So that is, just passed. However, if you're interested in fall, I'm sorry, June 1 is our fall early enrollment deadline. I'm sorry, that just passed. However, if you're interested in the spring term, which is the following term in January, if you get your application into us and register for classes by December 1, you can receive the early enrollment scholarship. And then of course for next summer, May 1 is our application deadline. So my contact information is on the slide in front of you. So is Dalila's. And if there are any questions in the chat, or if anybody wants to come off of mute, Dalila, do you want to answer any of the questions that are in the chat?
I think I've addressed most of them.
Okay.
Casey's asked if it's possible to earn credits in humanities-based programs like the MPA. So I just wanted to clarify, most of the MLA courses are not eligible because they're very instructor specific a lot of times. So it would be really difficult to demonstrate that level of experience. But definitely the MPA is a part of this assessment process, as are all of the other graduate programs. Does anybody else have any questions? And I have
a question. Can you hear me? How long did you say it takes to create this document? I got 3 classes left in the master's program. I think business of IT, 1 elective and a capstone. Just kind of curious if I wanted to, the business of IT and pick an elective, try to knock those 2 out with one of these processes. How long does it take to do that, would you think?
It really depends on how much time you have. So we've had, there was one person who was earning a master's in IT who sort of took the winter break. And he completed 2 portfolios during that time, and they were both approved, and he received credit for both of them. But generally, it's tough to say sort of how long it would take, because it depends on the number of learning outcomes. So some classes might have 5, some might have like 12 or 15, which requires obviously more time. But the other time-consuming piece is getting the supplementary documents. So for example, if you're looking for a letter from a supervisor, you have to be able to, give them time to turn it around and get it back to you. And that's what I've noticed some difficulties in the past, is that it just that part can take some additional time too. So it really depends on what your schedule is like, how much time you have to spend on writing. But like I said, it can be completed in a couple of weeks if that's really all you're doing. But then if you have a full-time job and you're taking 2 classes, then it might take longer. So it's been quite a range.
Yeah, I was just making sure it wasn't going to take a full, semester to complete. And then you have to meet with an advisor. How often do you meet with them?
So you would, so we would talk just to make sure that the class that you've identified would be a part of would be eligible for this process. And to answer any additional questions you might have. And usually for graduate students, we make sure that the program director also approves the course, because just to make sure that it counts towards your degree, because some of the programs are very structured in terms of what's required. And there are also some, like the MPA, for example, has a couple of courses that are not eligible. They would like you to take it in person. So that would be sort of the initial advising meeting, is just to make sure that all of that is all right. And then that's it. Once you're signed up. For graduate students, you are working at your own pace. For undergraduate students, you are in a full semester long class before actually finishing your portfolio and submitting it. So that's much longer. But the grad students can kind of really choose to select the pace that you want to work.
Okay. Thanks.
That's a good question. So assuming that initial, when that initial conversation takes place, the idea is, 1, to ensure that the course is eligible for the degree, but I'm assuming there might be some dialogue around ensuring the student's experience will meet the requirements. So I guess that being said, what is the passing rate of the portfolio reviews? Is it, generally speaking, when people submit these, are they approved, or are there some that go through the process, pay the fee, and then don't get their portfolio approved? And if that happens, what is the recourse from that?
Our passing rate is really high compared to, so there are other schools that have this process. And our passing rate, I think, was like close to 90%. But in part, that's because we try to really inform you, in advance what's required. And then, you will see those learning outcomes before you sign up and before you start writing. So we really encourage folks to look at them and really self-reflect. Can I write a significant amount a significant narrative around this one learning outcome and do that for each one. So it's generally worked pretty well.
Okay.
I think we haven't had a lot of graduate students go through the process, but I'm pretty sure everybody that has passed. And then there were a handful of undergraduate courses that weren't awarded credit. And usually, typically it wasn't on the first try. So basically you get the 3 courses as part of your tuition, 3 assessments. So we will get folks, well, I still have 1 more, so let me try and try it for this other class that I'm not super familiar with and see what happens. And that usually, that was usually when the assessments weren't approved.
Okay, understood. Thank you for that.
Yeah. My ceiling tiles are coming down. Sorry, this is really strange. So I see the message from Greg. I was gonna write back. So, the class itself, so the PAPL class is really designed for you to create a portfolio that that would be assessed. So you would have to have a portfolio in mind before you would register for the course. So it's not designed to be taken as sort of a single class. It's designed to prepare you to submit a portfolio for assessment afterwards. So it doesn't sound like this would be a good option if you're just interested in taking the portfolio class itself. But I'm certainly happy to talk to you more about it and see if there is any interest in completing a portfolio afterwards.
And I know you said the portfolio was approximately 30 pages. That was for the entire portfolio, or was that per objective?
For the entire portfolio. And they're usually it doesn't include the supplementary documents. So that's your narrative. And there are other pieces to it. There is an introduction and there's an overview of what the class is that you're writing about. So there's some additional content that's included as well.
So if there's not any more questions, do you see any more in the chat, Dalila?
I'm looking, so there's, I should have my classes in August and fall. I've registered for 3 credits. How and when should I have my materials? So if you could maybe clarify if this is about the portfolio class or the materials for admission, that would be helpful.
Oh yeah, sorry, I am Sylvia. I think I'm asking for the material for the classes. Actually, I should start in August, as I said. So I don't know if I ask early or I should wait till August. I don't know. For MPH.
And this is for
MPH.
MPH. Yeah, so so once you start, we can enroll you in, we can have the discussion, the advising discussion, and then enroll you in the self-guided course, and then you would have some time to gather all the materials for the course that you've selected.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And I see a hand raised, Charles. Did you have a question, Charles?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
You are getting me?
Yes,
Oh, you are getting me?
yes.
I'm Charles Okwom from Kenya, East Africa.
Welcome.
Okay, I was asking, how can somebody from Kenya, East Africa, apply for masters in security management on campus?
And that's a Sheila question.
Yeah, so thank you. You can, same process, go on our website and use our application. If you have transcripts that are from outside of the United States, which I think that you probably will, you'll need to have them evaluated through a transcript evaluation organization like WES, WES is generally the one that we recommend. That's really the process. If you have, further questions, my contact information is on the screen and you can send me emails, but you can start, I suggest you sort of look at our application and sort of go through it, and then feel free to send me any questions that you might have.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Right, any other questions? All right, what if anything else comes up, feel free to reach out to us. Thanks again for taking the time to join us today. I look forward to talking to some of you again in the future and kind of learning more about your experiences, and hopefully seeing you around campus.